Why would the wisps lead me here?
When we went on our research trip to Scotland, I was trying to infuse my crew with that passion I have for Scotland. I'd been there a few years before, and I just fell in love with it.
There's something else I want to show you. I think it's down
The
in
character
here.
of Scotland has been brilliantly realised because they all went. They didn't look it up in a book. I think they went off to Scotland.
It's really great to be there and breathe the cold, fresh air and have the wind in your face.
Do we need to take 12 artists across the pond and around a country? And what we've learned is not only do you need to, it's critical. We're able to sit and smell it and feel it.
That's good stuff.
I really believe that some of the best work you ever do is when you really feel it.
They're going in. Woohoo!
This is bracing!
The landscape in Scotland is epic, it can't help it.
Magnificent. The amount of beautiful scenery in this country that rapidly changes from mile to mile. I'm completely blown away by it.
It has this beautiful, rugged quality, but it has this softness to it, this feminine quality. It just made me want to lie down in the grasses everywhere because there's something growing on everything.
One thing that was really spectacular was the moss on the ground. And you would never know this unless you're actually there, but if you push your hand into it, it would literally sink down about a foot. So we would film that.
It's pretty awesome.
And it just kind of like...
And it has such contrasts. There's sometimes very delicate places where you'll find a little patch of moss, and then suddenly you get these great crags rising out of the green, these huge cliffs clanging down on you, and that fits the story.
And then you'd get to this pasture land, and it would be just bright, bright green.
Something that had really surprised me was how rapidly the landscape changes and how rapidly the weather changes.
The clouds will just cut light shapes across the hillside. You know what I mean? If we were to do it in a movie, it would look unreal.
Everything felt alive, like the clouds were always kind of boiling and the sun was coming through, and you'd be driving along and suddenly shafts of light were coming down on a cottage in a field, and it just felt very kinetic. Everything was kind of in motion or turning into a new thing.
On part of our trip, we went to this place called the Callanish Stones. And it was out in the middle of literally nowhere, just farmland, but it had these stones that were just set up in a very particular way. It is a very quiet place. It feels almost like it's a library or a cathedral that you're in, but it's these very simple stones, and you just kind of sit there and look at them, and they almost feel like they're looking back at you.
They're ancient stones that are 3,000 to 5,000 years old. You could almost feel the personalities. You know that the Vikings stood in front of that, and you know that it goes back even further than that.
There was something very, very striking about being in this place with the wind blowing. We had a sunny day, and you're not quite clear what they were used for. And we were all painting and sitting in the grass and enjoying the weather.
You feel this connection to this ancient period of time and the mystery of it. So that's the stuff you want to convey.
There was always an idea that the Ring of Stones was the center of this universe and where things started, and of the magic in the film.
I asked the shaders to make the lichen gold, so they'll be reflective. So they're in the shapes of lichen, but as the camera moves by or light just hits it, it'll sparkle like diamonds. It'd be nice to get a couple of hue shifts. It's just to create extra variety and interest when we're moving past these stones and moving around these stones. And it creates that feeling of that mystic quality. It makes it feel like a stage. And the stones are somewhat of a stage unto themselves. So just that amount of thought is put into that alone. And we do that on everything we do.
And we want a combination of mostly really strong cliffs like this, but then towards the back, we're going to add some of the cliffs that were like the castle you went to that had more...
Donator?
Donator that
Yeah.
had
That
sedimentary
pebbly
rock.
stuff,
Pebbly
yeah.
stuff, yeah.
The great thing about Scotland, particularly for this, is so much of it is still intact. There are castles all over the place.
It's funny to me because I haven't been out of the country, you know, I grew up on cartoons. If I see a real castle at the time, it's like, you know, that's gotta be Disneyland, you know, that's foam, you know, it doesn't seem real.
When you think of castles, you think of the big Disney castle in Disneyland. In Europe, we have real castles, and they've been there for 1,000 years.
What was striking about visiting actual castles is how not grand they were.
Oh, it's just a little room.
The spaces were a lot smaller than you would expect them to be.
I think from the outside, a castle looks very glamorous. It's only until you actually go inside that you realize people lived here. That's got to be awful.
Oh, man. This is my room.
Oh, you could add it.
Things were just kind of added on, or they were designed in such a way as an invading force would come in and wouldn't know where they're supposed to go.
Enemies quite often foxed by a bad step and will trip over it. So they started to deliberately put in a bad step. So only, in the dark you'd know where everything was, but your assailant wouldn't necessarily.
Right.
So a bad step is not just bad stonework, that's deliberate mischief.
Okay.
Right, if you're being attacked, you could come down with your broadsword or whatever, and you'd have it in your right hand.
Secret subterranean chambers undiscovered.
Originally, the castle design was just a freestanding castle surrounded by a wall on top of a hill. We introduced the village within the walls to give it just a little bit more life.
And if this is where the road's gonna go here, let's get another structure over here, and let's get another house in here.
Without a village there, we really didn't get a sense of who King Fergus was protecting. And so with the addition of the village that they ran through, you understood that there was a people that he had, and then it populated the castle.
You wanted to kind of give this area some sort of sense of community.
So you'd see people walking around doing things. It wasn't like it was an empty castle.
The people of Scotland have this incredible spunkiness to them. They just have this character that comes from living in this incredibly place.
Scots are tough in that way that they play hard. And they, I would think, fight pretty hard. So even their games are about throwing rocks and huge tree trunks. That's their fun, I guess, is to live in a little bit of pain and danger.
They're also very giving and hospitable and friendly people too. I mean, they'll look like this when you first come at them. And then once you say, hi, I'm Mark, then they go, great to meet you. What do you think of the weather? And they open up and they're friendly.
You want to see my harness collection first or the horses?
There's a rhythm to the language. There's a beauty to the language that I'm hoping we can get into our characters.
Oh, that scaffy witch gave me a gammy spell.
And they're very verbal in a way that, Americans tend to speak in one word. This is a full sentence country.
Where food is easy to obtain, man indulges himself in his three other passions: religion, art, and warfare, and not necessarily in that order.
The highlight for me was at the end of the day. We're all very tired. We're just at a bar in the hotel, and then all of a sudden this girl comes in, and she's just one of the locals, and she just starts singing and dancing. Our tour guide came out with his fiddle, and then we all got up and started singing and dancing, and Mark came out with his penny whistle, and it became this whole spontaneous party, which was truly amazing.
And the characters I wanted to create, I really wanted to infuse them with that spirit of life that the Scottish have.
Brave right now is set around 1066. The way that people would live during that time is very rugged. You had to be pretty good stock to survive. Their costume was designed to live outside a lot.
There were not kilts worn in Scotland in the 10th or 11th century, but we've taken some liberties. We actually got a tutorial. They wrapped Craig Grasso, our big muscly story guy, in this huge tartan.
And then you put your pin there.
You know, I think there's always two goals. One is to get a lot of visual reference. But for me, the other really big goal of the trip is that bonding experience.
Roger, we have Tia Crowder painting right now. You're on the movie vehicle. I want you to know that art is happening everywhere.
It was a great bonding experience, man. I mean, it was, you know, I think that's almost the best part about it.
Well, one of our places of lodging, the hotel didn't have enough room for everybody, but they had this little place called the Wee Bunkhouse, which looked like a garage out in the middle of this parking lot.
You open the door and it's a small room with 6 bunk beds.
6 of us guys got in there for one night, and it was a very special time.
Now I know these people. Some of them are quite quiet. Some of them are very, very loud. Mark Andrews.
All right, out! And we all snore, and we all make crazy...
And to get to know them day after day sitting on this bus was just the big treat for me.
So I think that really strengthens the team. When you come back, you have all of these things that you've now experienced that you're trying to put into the film, which I think is incredibly valuable.
We drank from the sacred well.
On that trip, I think the bond was formed with each other and with Scotland, and the idea that this is a very special place, and if we're going to set a story here, we're going to take it very seriously. There's a real connection with the countryside there. And they addressed the landscape with the story. They said, right, this part of the story will just be right here.
It not only bonded the crew together into a one mind of what this place was, but it also just, everyone fell in love with it and then had a passion for the film in return.
Forest and highlands all around.
Yeah.
And of course they loved it, as everyone does, because it's the most beautiful country in the world.